Boys and girls, this is Mrs. Kelly. This week it is all about the texture. Today we will learn about two different types of texture and practice creating texture using our art materials. Texture is one of the 7 elements of art, along with line, shape, form, space, color, and value. Real textures are surfaces that you can actually feel. Every real-life thing has some type of a texture, whether it's bumpy, pokey, smooth, rough, slimy, sticky, or soft. Artwork can have real-life textures too. You can feel it, especially if it's 3D art made from clay, wood, metal, or even fabrics. The second kind of texture is called visual or implied texture. These are textures that artists create using 2D media like pencils, crayons, ink, markers, watercolor, just to name a few. These textures look real, but they are not really there. It is the artist who learns how to use the art materials to create the visual texture, and this is what we're going to be doing today. Here's 2 examples of one real-life texture. The sculpture of the lion, you can see it's made out of metal. I bet if you could touch it, you would feel areas that were really smooth and then areas that might be pokey or rough too. This is, on the other side, visual texture. This is just a piece of paper, but the artist has made the texture come to life by using the art materials and all the tricks they use to create texture. Our task today is to practice creating visual texture. We will practice first on our Introduction to Texture worksheet. I will have you find objects or think of objects from around your house and then practice drawing the different textures on the other side of the worksheet. And then over here, we're going to practice using textures on one of Frida Kahlo's famous self-portraits. Both of these documents you will need to print out in Schoology in order to do this activity. Now let's see how to begin.
Okay, boys and girls, these are examples of the worksheets that we're going to be using to practice our texture today. You are not trying to create a beautiful piece of artwork. Today is all about experimentation and practicing, trying out your different tools to see what kind of textures you can get. We're going to start with this one here that says texture, an introduction to the element of texture, and it talks about 2 types of textures, actual textures, and then the textures that artists create that are called implied textures. What I'm going to have you do is pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that you can either think of or find around your house. Write the name of these items down, and then you're going to practice making texture for those. So if you have a kitty or a doggy or a bunny rabbit or some type of creature at your house, you could write down your pet and then try to do your pet's texture. You could write down your hair and try to do your hair texture. You could find wood or grass outside if your parents give you permission. I even have cotton on here too. So looking for objects around your house is a great way to do this. And then practicing doing the texture here. So let me give you an example. If I'm doing animal fur of my kitty cat, I can use colored pencil. Colored pencil works really, really well for doing fur because you can do long, skinny lines. And this is about the length of my kitty cat's fur. He has black fur. I just make lots of long, skinny lines close together without pushing real hard. And you can see it kind of looks furry now. So that's a pretty good animal fur texture. Now bird feathers, they're a bit different and they can also be a little bit tricky. Bird feathers, you usually start off with kind of a bumpy texture. You can do these with colored pencil or markers. Bird feathers are hard to do with crayons. Like that. I'm going to make it a little bit darker actually because I think this might be hard for you to see on the camera. So let's see. Let's pretend this bird has green feathers. I can start off with the bumpiness of it, and then I can add the lines down the middle. This is similar to maybe how you would do a lot of leaves on a branch for a tree. So you have to think about what the items might actually feel like if you're able to touch them. And then hair. Hair is very similar to animal fur, and you can do hair with any of the drawing utensils. I like to do hair with markers, and sometimes when I do hair, I add different colors together because it adds to the texture, gives it a nice textural look like that, so it looks more natural. Hair tends to be long and thicker pieces. That's a pretty good example of hair texture, like that. If you had really, really short hair, you could also do short spiky lines like this, similar to doing animal fur. Wood is rougher. Wood is kind of hard to do in marker because it's hard to get a rough texture in marker. Marker is usually good for doing really smooth textures. For doing wood, you could use colored pencil or crayon, and wood is kind of rough. And the thing when you're doing with wood is you're not going to color everywhere the same. You kind of do a little bit of a scribble color, leaving some areas open. And then you go back in, and then the areas in the middle you color just a little bit lighter to create sort of a rough texture. So I pushed harder in some places and did lighter in others. You can do the same thing with a crayon. Push harder in some places, do it lighter in other places, and it gives it kind of that rough texture that wood has. You can do that with marker. It just takes a little bit more effort because you have to kind of do little dashes like this. You see that looks better with the marker and the crayon combined rather than just the marker by itself. Now cotton is really, really fluffy, right? So anything that's fluffy or smooth like that, you can kind of use curved lines like a cloud or a pillow or even fabric. That's how you would do it with a marker. I can do the same thing with a colored pencil just by doing little ringlets like this, trying to make it look smooth. And then doing it with a crayon would be very, very similar, just doing little circles to make it look smooth and fluffy like that. So those are all pretty good examples of practice textures. Once I think I have that experimentation down, I'm going to go over to this. Now this you can certainly spend a lot of time coloring if you want to, but what I want you to do on it is just experiment trying to make each thing different. So like the leaf texture shouldn't be the same as the cat, and the cat shouldn't be the same as the person, and the person shouldn't be the same as the monkey. So as long as they're all different, then you've done pretty much your job. So I'm going to start with Frida Kahlo's hair. Now, Frida Kahlo is a very, very, very famous Mexican painter. She is no longer alive, but she is still very much celebrated all over the world because of all the many paintings she did. And she loved to paint pictures of herself. So this is an example or an outline of one of the self-portraits that she did. The real one obviously has a lot of color to it. So I'm adding some hair there with the marker, and then I'm going to go back in, I think with a crayon or a colored pencil. Let's try the crayon. I'm going to experiment with that and see if I can fill in some of those spaces with the hair and see if I can get it the way that I like it. I always love mixing marker and crayon and colored pencil together whenever I'm doing texture, because I feel like you can get a lot more different textures that way than just using one or the other. That looks pretty good. I'm satisfied with that. Skin is usually very smooth. I find the best thing to do skin with is colored pencil, because it's really easy to do colored pencil very lightly, and it's easy to do it without getting a lot of stripes. It's very hard to do skin with marker, because marker will almost always leave you stripes. You can also do skin with crayon if you do not have colored pencil in your house. But you see how I'm just very quickly practicing getting a smooth surface with my colored pencil to see if I can get the feeling of that skin in there. I don't even have to spend time coloring the whole thing. And now my kitty cat, I'm gonna try fur on my kitty cat, and I'm gonna do those short little furry lines. You can take the time to finish coloring your kitty cat all in. I am not going to do it here on the video because that would take up a lot of your art time. I'm just showing you different examples. So you can see how the fur on my kitty cat doesn't look the same as my skin and doesn't look the same as my hair. And then when I'm doing the leaves, I'm gonna try to do something even different. Leaves sometimes can be very smooth with some bumpy edges. So I'm gonna color part of it in smooth with a crayon and then see what would it look like, experiment, if I took a colored pencil now and colored in some other parts with the darker green. Oh, I like the way that looks. That has a pretty interesting texture to it. Now maybe on my next one I'll try something different. Maybe I'll just use all marker on my next one, or all colored pencil. See how that looks different than that? And you're gonna keep going in each area. Just do a little bit of experimenting to see if you can get the different textures. We're gonna be using really cool textures to make a project with next week. And that's why we're practicing today, because good artists always practice first before they start something bigger. So I hope you have fun experimenting today, and I can't wait to show you our project for next week. See you later, bye-bye.
Here is next week's lesson. I just wanted to give you a little preview. We're going to be using the texture that we learned how to make to be creating our very own fuzzy bears and sweaters, or as I like to call them, a texture TED. Have fun drawing!